Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back for our next installment of 20 Minutes for Israel from Israel. Thank you for joining us. We are delighted to be joined today by Felicity K, who is the Director of Content for a new organization in Israel called the Israeli Spirit, which is, as I sent out to everyone, which is also referred to as the Civilian Israeli Advocacy Center, which is the largest Israeli advocacy body in the entire country. It was started in partnership with one of our old emissaries, Elia, for those who remember him. I think he was here 5 or 6 years ago at this point. He reached out, and we'll post the link to their website shortly. But they do unbelievable work providing information and content to share across social media channels and just get out information to the world in 45 different languages, all set up and curated. It's really quite an operation to see. And we're really honored that you're joining us. This program is sort of our way as we spend most of our day thinking about Israel and making sure that we can do whatever we can to support, to connect with people in Israel, to hear about initiatives that are going on and people doing important work, whether that's fighting on the actual front or fighting on a very important front, which is the public opinion, or supporting people within the country. So we're really honored that you're joining us. Can you just tell us a little about yourself, where you're from, how you got to Israel, and we'll go from there.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, by the way. It's really, it's so lovely to speak with Americans, and it just, I'm around Israelis all day, so sometimes I just want to speak in English, as you can probably imagine. Especially, I think it's so important to be in touch with the diaspora community. I mean, I know me myself, I'm originally from London. I was born and raised in the Bournemouth and the Bushy communities, if any of you have heard of them. My mother she just retired, but she was the headmistress, the principal of Beis Yaakov for 30 years. So I'm still very involved in the Jewish community back in London. And me myself, I actually lived in Miami for 2 years, a very long time ago now. But I originally moved to Israel in 2014 in the middle of Operation Protective Edge. And I mean, literally in the middle, as in the day my flight took off, they were shooting rockets at the airport, so I couldn't land. So I feel right from the beginning, I've kind of seen Israel's worst side. It swings and roundabouts, but ultimately this is my home other than England. This is where I want to be, and this is where I'm going to be, especially during the hard times. You move to Israel for the love of it, and kind of just like a spouse, you don't give up in the hard times, and that's what we're going through right now.
Right. So before we jump into some of your work, can you just tell us obviously you don't need to have to recount the whole 4 weeks that has transpired since October 7th, just a little bit what your experience has been in terms of, from October 7th till today, and sort of the different, or curate a couple of moments in that process.
Yeah, sure. So as you know, we weren't expecting the October 7 attacks. It's something that me personally, I don't really watch the news, especially not in the last year. I was completely disconnected. But, it was something that was so big that we actually heard about it from our neighbors. We were woken up with a siren at 6:30 in the morning, which is a little out of the blue, but, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. And that was it. And then basically we decided to take the dog for a walk. And that was when we were told to get back in our homes. There are like Hamasnikim running around in Sderot. And, it's Shabbat morning, you're half asleep. You're like, what? I've definitely not understood, especially for me, Hebrew is not my native language. I'm inclined to believe I haven't understood something properly if, something that crazy happens. And basically that was that. We came home, we turned on the news, and sure enough, we saw Hamasnikim running amok in the kibbutzim and Sderot. And you have to understand, this is something, I'm sure you guys understand this as Jews, it's something from your worst nightmare when the enemies are within the gates. And basically we were completely just glued to the TV from the second we saw what was going on until I think 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And we pretty much didn't move for the next few days. I mean, so much so I've actually got a back problem from not moving for those few days. A lot of people here do. So that would be one thing, just the complete and utter like full body shock that we went into or experienced this. I think another key moment for me would be when it's kind of a weird one, because just seeing the world's reaction and how it changed, how the tide changed so quickly. You know, for me, I'm in touch with my family every day. They're still back in London. My fiance's family lives just outside of Tel Aviv as well, so we're all in touch all the time. And just seeing how quickly it went from, oh my gosh, Israel, that's so terrible, the third worst terror attack that's ever happened, you know, in the history of since we've been counting these sorts of things, to, you know, pro-Palestinian demonstrations, to people being killed in LA, people being attacked in London. Just, it's heartbreaking and it's unbelievable, but at the same time, it kind of pushes me to keep on doing what I'm doing, you know, for the safety of us all, for my safety, for your safety, for my family's safety, because I've grown up with anti-Semitism. I didn't grow up with rockets, but I've grown up with anti-Semitism. And quite frankly, I would rather take the rockets over what is going on right now outside of Israel.
We've heard that from a lot of people, unfortunately, in our conversations from Israel, that they're more worried about us and we're worried about them.
Yeah.
I think it bespeaks some of the very deep connection that I think has been exposed and strengthened between the diaspora Jewry and the Jews and the people of Israel. So you are part of this movement, this advocacy movement. Tell me a little bit just what happened, how it started, how you got involved, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you're up to.
So as I'm sure you all know, Hasbara advocacy is not the strongest, and it never has been. And I know this myself as a British Jew, that no matter how many Jews are in a community, how big it is, how contributing it's been to the history of America, Britain, Europe, whatever, the second that something happens in Israel, it's taken out on you guys. I grew up with it. You know, my school, I think it's exactly the same at Jewish schools in America, because I've been there and I've taught there. You know, it's not normal that we have to go through airport style security every time we go into a school. And I was actually a school teacher back in England and back in America when I used to live there. And, you know, going into non-Jewish schools, you don't have that. And this was basically what drove me to get in touch with Eliav and with the people at the headquarters. So what we do all day, every day, we're a bunch of volunteers, and our numbers grow every single day. I think we're up to 100 day in, day out volunteers 24/7 at the headquarters, and something like 2,000 other volunteers who work remotely from around the world. And what we do is we basically try to combat all the online hate. We produce our own materials in, I think it's up to 50 languages at this point, because we want the world to know what's going on, because the world is always against us. And quite frankly, it's not fair. You know, it's not fair that we're kind of damned if we do and damned if we don't. And to the point where if we put up literal conversations of Hamasnikim telling each other, oops, we bombed the hospital, oh, let's just blame the Jews, that we're told that we're, you know, using a script, that we're using fake actors. But the second they put their lies up with, for example, the same dead kids that move around in all of their different films and everything, that's fine, that's just taken as it is. So I make it my duty, and my team make it their duty, and the entire headquarters makes it their duty to show the truth, to try. Because you know what, we've divided people into three groups. There are people who are with us, Israelis, Jews, and other just well-intentioned, humane people. There are people who will never be with us. You know, we don't need to talk about them too much, but there are people who are, quite frankly, just stupid. They don't know, they're jumping on the bandwagon. I went to uni with thousands of them, you know. They don't really know the situation, but it's cool to love Palestine. It's cool to love Gaza. It's cool to love Hamas. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know the difference between Gaza and Hamas and Palestine and the West Bank. And those are the people who need to be taught, and they need to be educated. And if we can get through to just a few people, you know, it's kind of like what we say about saving a life. If you can get through to one person, you've gotten through to a whole range of people. And it's not easy. Every day is very tough. But I keep doing it because, quite frankly, we all need to feel safe.
Right. So tell us a little bit practically, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? What are
Like
the
my
operations
day-to-day?
that you're doing? Yeah,
Okay.
or just some of the projects that people are working on.
So we have a few different strands of the headquarters. The strand that I work on, I run the content department. What that means is we we do three things. Number one, we produce original materials based on, you know, something that we've just seen or that we want to respond to, or just an idea we've had. For example, we did a really successful video about feminism. Oh, so you're, you know, targeting people who believe in feminism but support Gaza for some reason, or Hamas. So you think you're really a feminist. This is what happens under Hamas. And that was super viral. We do that. The second strand that we do in content is
when you say super viral, give us a number. Like, what does that mean?
We put it up. What is today? Wednesday? No, please. We put it up, I think 3 days ago. It's got 100,000 views already, and that's only on Instagram. So we had a lot of shares as well. We had a few thousand shares. We don't have all the metrics and data yet, but basically every share we can guarantee has at least 5 other shares, 5 views, you know, like if not hundreds. So it's gone super viral in my book. And then we have a breaking news strand that responds to things such as, for example, the hospital blast, the safe corridor, the Gazans waving white flags. We have people on that ASAP, because you need, as we've learned, you need to have an instant response, or a like instant response. And the third thing we do is we support other departments. We're the biggest department, but we support other departments with international activities. What that means is printing posters. You know, there was the baby carriages, and also what is it called, the Shabbat dinner table in Times Square. There's one in Finland, and a few other places that I can't quite recall right now. But we just support, and I mean, it's very important for me that, especially, and I hope you guys know what I'm talking about, but especially Israelis understand that you have to deliver a message not only in fluent English, but you have to deliver it in the right way. So, for example, I would speak in a very different way to Brits as I would to Americans, you know, or I would to any other European countries who want to converse with me in English. And that's where my department kind of supports people the most, is that making sure the message is delivered in the correct way possible. But, you know, we also have a range of, a department of 2,000 translators across 50 languages, including some really weird ones. Like we had a translator for Tagalog, which is a Filipino language, Hindi, like, because people just want to get involved. They just want to help, and they want to do the best they can. But yeah, we have a lot of different things cropping up.
I saw that you have on the website, it says 20,000 ambassadors. So tell us a little bit about, I think you have another 25, and probably by the time we post this, you'll have another 300 or 400 people who are watching. So maybe another 400 ambassadors. What does that mean? How do people get involved in that?
So it could be a range of things. I just think Alyssa has asked a question, so I guess we'll come back to that afterwards.
Sure.
Is that right? Okay. So regarding ambassadors, well, we have a lot of our content is available online. We have it translated into something like 45, 50 languages and growing. So there are several different ways to get involved. Either people volunteer directly for us and they become an ambassador for that. They share our content. They're responsible for, you know, taking the content in their language and sharing it, or they're social media influencers. And then it's the same thing. They take the content, or they can suggest content they want to work on. They can suggest ideas to us, and we'll help them produce it. But, you know, there are thousands of ways to get involved. You could be a part of bringing, you know, what do you call it, a presentation to people in America, to people worldwide, staging something like you saw in Times Square, the Shabbat table, the baby carriages, things like that. There's literally, the sky is the limit. And because we're a volunteer organization, we're very open to ideas. We're very open to help. We're very open to just getting the word out in any way possible that you think would be effective.
Great. You can take the question. You want to take Alyssa's question?
Yes. Okay. So she asked, how would you speak to Europeans differently to how you'd speak to Brits and Americans? So it really depends on the country. But, you know, what I've noticed is that, for example, in Eastern Europe, you have to be much more tachlis, you know, straight to the point. You can't say, oh, you know, how would you feel if this was your home and Hamas came in and murdered you, or you know, you have to be much more, this is what happened. This is evidence, and XYZ, it could happen to you. Very, very straight to the point. But for example, in America, you have to kind of create the dissonance a little bit. It's like, oh, you know, this was a beautiful family. I come from a marketing background, so this is kind of where my mind always goes. But, you know, such a beautiful family, such a beautiful party. Oh, all of a sudden there's a massacre. And that dissonance is what keeps people thinking and wondering, and then the message doesn't leave them. And that's ultimately how you get your message across.
Sounds like it's I think so many of us try to present the information and just feel like if we put it out, but there's so much to the presentation and the way we curate the information that makes a difference. And I think part of being able to push out this information and use the content is to be able to already have people who have thought through that. And I think that's
100%. And I think a really important point here is that this headquarters grew out of, first of all, a lack of governmental support or hasbara. And secondly, there was actually a headquarters, it's now above us in the floor above, but they are the governmental headquarters for advocacy and explanation. And I mean, we are much more flexible. We are, we're dynamic. We have thousands of volunteers, and we can pretty much say or do what we want, which governments can't. For example, I'll go back to the hospital blast. The second that I saw that happen, I know enough of Israeli history and Israeli army maneuvers and everything to know that, number one, we would not blast a hospital. Number two, it wouldn't have happened that quickly. Number three, I'm preaching to the choir here, but we wouldn't have been able to count 500 dead people in the space of a few minutes. But and in those 30 minutes, I wrote an article about it. It was insane. Suddenly the Middle East was on fire. There were 3 days of mourning declared, etc., etc. Now, if you're a bunch of volunteers and you're speaking from a civilian point of view, you can literally just come out and say with like 90% accuracy, it wasn't us. We wouldn't do that. Here's the evidence or whatever. But when you work as a governmental organization, like the spokesperson said, you have to check, and in fact, Eliav, he called the Israeli army spokesperson and he said, look, we have to say something. We're losing people here. The Middle East is on fire, and it's because we're not saying what's happened. And the spokesperson said to him, Daniel Hagari, that you see, on TV all the time, he said, look, I'm 99.9% sure it wasn't us, but we have to be certain. And that certainty took 5 hours. And by the point, we'd already lost the battle, it's just insane. And that is really kind of why I do what I do, because there is an art to saying these things. Unfortunately, when you put up evidence, it's not going anywhere. People aren't believing it. So you have to be a little bit clever. You have to know how to deliver the message as much as how, what the message is. And I think that's where a lot of Jews fall short. Sorry, yeah.
No, I'm sorry to chime in. Before we go to wrap up, just one more question. In terms of like the Hasbara battle, so you hear a lot about the government, and this is clearly a civilian operation. Are you getting news sources from the government? Is the government trying to get their hands around this also? What can you tell us? I think that facial expression tells us everything.
Yeah, literally, I remember being, just a Jewish schoolgirl living outside of Israel, and then a Jewish university student, and then just, a Jewish community member. And every time something happened, it would affect us in England and in America when I lived in Miami, and I couldn't get my head around it. Why the Israelis, no offense to them all, didn't try harder. And, now I've lived here 10, 15 years. I understand it's because they just don't get that, like, they need to do that. And it's insane to me. They don't get that there's a connection between what happens there to what happens in the diaspora. And there's not a lot of emphasis on Hasbara. There was a minister who resigned, I think pretty much at the beginning of the war, because she was not doing her job. And she was like, look, we've got a war on. Let me tell her credit. We've got a war on. You don't need me. You guys, whatever. And that's when people like Eliav jumped to the chance, in 48 hours of the war being declared, he was up and running and having people helping him and just, all hands on deck. Because there is a huge vacuum. The government don't really care. They don't really see the need. And that's where we were like, thank God that we have people like Eliav who can say, like, this is not cool. I'm really paraphrasing here, but this is unacceptable. We need to do something. This is my country. And clearly the line stops here, because if we don't have Israel, we don't have explanation, we don't have Hasbara. Everyone is effective, not just Israelis, but obviously the entire diaspora. So yeah, long story short, no government involvement. They don't care. They are terrible at their jobs. I'm sure there are a few, good apples, but we're pretty much left to ourselves. And like I said, the upside of this is we are very dynamic and we can do what we want. Downside is that really we don't have the platform that, for example, Bibi Netanyahu has, or the Israeli army spokesperson. But silver linings.
Right. So as we go to our wrap up, we as you talked to a group of American Jews who are trying really hard to connect, to be focused on Israel, to do what we can. What do you think we need to know? What marching orders do you want to leave us with?
First of all, stay vigilant. That's always good. That's what I tell my family every day. Second of all, if you want to, we're always looking for donations. I'm sorry to push that on you, but it's very honest. It takes money to kind of publish the materials that we're making, to get speakers to the right places. So if you want, I can send you a link afterwards to show you how you can donate. And thirdly, if you can share our materials, if you can go into our website, we're about to launch a new website. It looks amazing. So go into there, share our materials as much as you're comfortable with, because a lot of thought goes into them. Like I said, my team and myself, we come from marketing backgrounds, so we're not just putting up, Hamas is lying, Hamas is ISIS. It's very well thought out material. Please just share away. And if you want to get involved volunteering, we'd also love that. Feel free to get in touch, myself, Eliav, or even just through the website. I think every little helps, and whether that's a donation, whether that's your time, whether it's sharing, we're all in this together. We all need Israel to survive. And that's basically it in a nutshell.
Thank you so much for joining us. For those who are listening to this recorded, the link to the website and to support this important effort is in the details in the description in the YouTube link. So you can click right through there. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a safe day. Felicity, thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to seeing everyone again tomorrow for our next installment of 20 Minutes for Israel from Israel.
Thank you for having me.